Hey everyone, I'm Paul Slack with Vende Digital, and welcome to today's webcast. I'm super excited that you're here because today I'm going to walk you through our framework for building a demand gen funnel that's going to help you generate more pipeline and sales in 2022. Now, this is the same framework that we use for our full service clients, and I'm super excited to walk you through that today. Now, before we get too far into it, I do have a couple of housekeeping items. I always forget to go through these, so I had to build a slide to remind myself today, but I'm sure you're going to have questions as we go through this, and we do want this to be an interactive session for you today. So I've got Bailey Ray, who is one of our senior campaign managers. She's manning chat even right now, so as I go through the material today, if you have any questions at all, just chat those questions in, and Bailey will do the best she can to get those answered for you. And I'm going to talk for maybe 45 or 50 minutes, just depends on how many gusts I go into or side roads I go down. Hopefully I'll get us done in about 45 or 50 minutes. But then once we wrap, I'll jump on chat as well, and I'll stay until we get everybody's questions answered. And then I always get this question every time we do a webcast, and that is, are your slides available? And I always make them available, but half the time I forget to tell people about it. So I'm going to let you know right now, you can go and get a copy of the slides. Just go to vendedigital.com/go. And once you get to that page, you're going to see a lot of stuff on there. I'm going to point back to that page several times today because there's some other resources that you can download there. But for right now, if you want to go to that page and just drop down about halfway down, you'll see a link to my slides, and you can go through those and follow along as well. So that way I remember that I do have slides, and they're yours, and feel free to use them however you'd like to go or however you'd like to use them. So we are talking about demand generation today. Obviously, that's the topic of our webcast, and I think the first thing that we really need to do is give you a definition of what demand generation is. And the reason for that is, I'm sure there's lots of different businesses watching the webcast right now, and if we went around to everybody and asked everybody to give a definition for demand generation, we'd probably get a different answer for everybody that's here. So I need to give you just a level set for this presentation, really what we mean by demand generation, and I'm going to do it in a formula framework. And you'll see I'll come back to a similar framework as we talk about other concepts today. But when Vende Digital talks about demand generation, really we're talking about doing a few things. It starts always with your right audience. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time today understanding who our best customers are, what we call our ideal customer profile. Now, this isn't everybody that we can sell to. It's really understanding who are the best of the best, our ideal customers. So to do demand gen right, we have to start with the right audience, and then we want to add in always on insightful, useful content that's going to educate and inform our ideal customer profile. But we can't stop there. So we have to have a great audience. We've got to give them really good information, but that information that we give them must ultimately point back to your superpower. And so when you've got the right audience, you're always on and providing useful content that points back to your superpower or your unique selling proposition. That's when you're creating demand for your business, and that's our definition of demand generation. Now, as we go through this material today, obviously you're making an investment in time, and I certainly appreciate you doing that with us today. And here's what's in it for you. I promise if you can stick with me until the very end and learn elements of this framework and even apply the framework on your own, or tactics that I'm going to share with you that line up underneath the framework, and implement them for your business, I do think in 2022 you're going to get more engagement with your ideal customer. And that's really good news, because if you generate more engagement with your customer, then you're ultimately going to generate higher quality leads. That's number two. That's going to take you to number three, which is increased win rates. Now, that's going to make your sales team really happy. If you can give them leads that are going to be easier for them, that are more teed up and ready to go, they're going to close them more frequently, and that's going to help you generate more revenue. But all of this ultimately is going to lead us to point number four, which is a happier boss. And I think we all want happier bosses. Now, speaking of happier bosses, I did want to share this study that I found on Forrester recently, where they actually went out and surveyed CEOs of B2B companies, and they asked them, hey, when you're, what are you looking for? What are those attributes that you're looking for from your CMO, your head of marketing, whoever's kind of quarterbacking the marketing division of your business? What are those attributes that you're looking for? And there were several that Forrester pointed out, but there were three that I thought were super relevant to today's discussion. The very first thing that the CEO said they're looking for from their marketing leader is that they want that marketing leader to really own the buyer. They want that marketing leader to know the buyer better than anybody else in the company. And that's certainly something we're going to talk about today. Number two, they want that marketing leader to be able to drive revenue through a demand gen engine, which is certainly a big part of what we're going to cover today. And then number three, I thought this one was really interesting and super relevant for today, is they really want their marketing leader to be digital first. I think the last 18 to 24 months have really kind of made it to the C-suite that we are in this digital transformation era. And if we're going to reach our buyers in 2021 and 2022, we're going to have to do it with a digital first mentality. And so if you want a happy CEO in 2022, these are three things that I think you need to be thinking about and working on. And certainly a lot of those we're going to be talking about today. Now, I do want to give you a couple of really quick case studies. As I mentioned, the framework I'm about to walk you through is the same framework that we use for our full service clients. And so I wanted to give you a couple of case studies of how this stuff really does work. So this first case study here, this is a B2B technology company. We're looking at a year's worth of data. And so we were able to work with them and apply the framework that I'm about to walk you through here. And you can see a couple of interesting things. One over on the far left, I don't have it circled. We didn't grow their traffic that much. Their traffic just went up about 12% year over year, but the real story comes on the far right, where we were able to grow their leads by 3x, by a factor of 3 times, just by deploying the things that I'm going to walk you through today. And so that's a technology company. I know there's a lot of different types of B2Bs watching today, and so I wanted to give you another type of business as well. So this is an industrial equipment company, and they hadn't been as sophisticated in digital marketing as the technology company was. And so, some of the things we were deploying for them were kind of first time things that they'd ever done. And you can see on the far left, we had a big increase in their traffic, but really take a look at the far right here, 7 times more leads by just deploying the things that we're going to walk you through today. And as I mentioned, I really hope that you'll apply these things and get some good value out of them for 2022. Now, you may be asking yourself, though, why is Vende doing this? What is the purpose behind it? And absolutely, we have 2 goals that we're trying to accomplish today. Number one, we hope that most of you that are going to come and watch today are going to take our information, take our resources, learn our framework. And if you've got the resources and the skill and the people to deploy this on your own, have at it. We really encourage you to give it a try, and we want you to try to do these things and get the value out of them. But what we're looking for are mid-market B2B companies, and specifically mid-market B2B companies that feel like, I really want to be in digital marketing and I really want to do demand generation the right way, but I just don't have the skills and I don't want to do it myself. I need some help. So if that's you, we'd love to talk to you about that. But if that's not you, please just take the information, use it for your own benefit, and we are totally happy with that. The second thing, and I'll get more into this a little bit later on, but we are launching a community and a live event series that kicks off next month on November the 10th that we're calling the Demand Gen Jam Sessions. Not easy to say, but really kind of cool. We're excited about it. Demand Gen Jam Sessions. And hold your horses. I'll talk to you about that a little bit later on, but it's going to be a great opportunity for us to come together and work together and have an awesome 2022. Okay, so as we're continuing down this discussion and really trying to understand, how do we grow our pipeline and grow our revenue with demand generation in 2022, there's some things we need to stop doing that might have worked really well in the past, and there's some new things that we need to look at doing, some different things that we need to be doing. And I'm going to walk you through that. I think it's going to really help us kind of get our heads around this. So the first thing that we need to stop doing is thinking that our website is the place where all of our content our great content needs to live. Now, I'm going to tell you that 24 months ago, if you were watching one of our webcasts or came to one of our lunch and learns a couple of years ago, I would have told you the opposite. I would have said your website is where all of your great content needs to live, and really all these other channels like social or LinkedIn or whatever, you really want to get people out of those channels into your website. That's where you're going to have the best chance to ultimately convert them. And while your website is still very important, what we want to start doing is thinking about how can we deliver value in the channel where our ideal customer profile actually goes. Our buyers, they actually go to learn about things. That's where we need to be delivering the value and delivering our information and our content. Number two, we've got to get out of this mindset of trying to gate everything. You know, the minute you've got a long form piece of content, maybe 2,000 words or so, and you think, oh, this is really great, this is going to be really useful, let's throw a form in front of it and require that our buyers fill out a form to get to it. And so while gating assets and guides and things like that is still really important, we've got to change our mindset. We can't gate everything. We only want to gate things that really show that our buyer is in market. You're going to hear me talk a lot today about future buyers and now buyers. And so the things that we want to gate are things where we kind of know they're a now buyer and that they're actually trying to solve a problem that we can solve for them. Those are the things that we want to gate. All the other great information that we come up with, we just want to make available to them where they go to learn. Okay, the next thing that we want to stop doing, and this is kind of tied to that gating everything, right, is trying to convert everyone right now. That's that pushy used car salesman approach, and that just doesn't work in 2021 or 2022. And really, what we want to start thinking about isn't lead generation and getting everybody to become a lead right now, but really it's about content consumption. It's about creating really amazing content and making sure that our best buyers are actually seeing that content, and that's going to help us a lot on the demand gen side. The next one is buying lists. And so I know that a lot of B2B companies like to buy lists, but my encouragement to you as we move forward is for you to think about not necessarily buying a list, but building an audience. I really want everybody watching today's webcast to start thinking about yourself as like a media company. So instead of being a B2B company selling a service or a product, think that you're like ABC, you're like Netflix, you're like any kind of company that's got content, and because of that, we really need to build an audience. And so it's not buying lists, it's really how do we create and connect and engage with an audience that cares about what we have to say. And then finally, and this is really important, we've got to get out of the content marketing for the sake of content marketing game and creating what I call fluff pieces, things that are just not valuable, but we feel like, oh, we got to write a blog a week, we better get a blog out the door. But rather, I want you to take a step back and really think about creating some really good, what we call remarkable content. So those are some things to stop doing and some things that we need to start doing. And I think that's going to set the framework for us as we go through the information today. I do want to take a quick moment here and just take a pause and go, man, I really get marketing is harder than ever, right? I think the last 24 months have made our jobs as marketers maybe harder than they've ever been, right? There's more competition. All of our competition is going online. When we think about online, there's more channels out there. Things that have worked traditionally in the past aren't working as well anymore. So we've got events as an example of that. You know, live events aren't working as well as they had been before the pandemic. We've got virtual events. We've got hybrid events. There's just a lot to deal with right now. Then you've got things like privacy, just a lot going on in the world. And now we've got to figure out this demand gen thing. And oh, don't forget, your boss is probably coming to you right now since it's getting to be the end of 2021 and saying, hey, marketing person, here's what I want. I want you to generate as many leads as humanly possible in 2022, or maybe inhumanly as possible. And oh, by the way, I want a new website. I need a career site. I need some PowerPoints done. We need to rebrand. I mean, it never seems to end. So I do appreciate you've got a really, really hard job and a difficult challenge ahead of you in 2022. And hopefully some of this stuff will make your life a little bit easier. But on top of all of that, so Yes, our job is hard as marketers. I want us to also feel empathetic about the buyer's job. You know, it's harder than ever to be a buyer right now. So not only is your job hard, your sales guy's job is hard too, or gal's job is hard too, because the buyer's job is even harder. Some of the data that I've seen say that in today's buying world, the buyer isn't one person. It's actually 5 to 11 people within your buying organization that's trying to make a buying decision together. And oftentimes those people work in different departments. And as a result of that, you know, we're not selling to one person, we're selling to many people, and they've got competing priorities. And guess what? Their plates are really full too. I mean, there's a lot on their plate, and this isn't the only thing they're having to deal with. In fact, Gartner did an interesting study recently where they went out to B2B buyers and they just said, hey, tell us about your last purchase experience. Was it easy? Was it hard? Was it extremely hard? And can you believe it? You can see it right here behind me. 77% of the B2B companies said, not only was the last transaction that I did hard, it was extremely hard. And so that makes our world even harder. So, but there's also an opportunity there, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit, because if we can make their job or their life easier, I think that's a tremendous competitive advantage. On top of kind of their job being hard, I think we all understand that today's buyer is actually selling to themselves, right? They're going out there and learning on their own, talking to peers, doing research on their own, and pushing off that decision or pushing off talking to your sales rep until the last possible minute. In fact, according to Gartner, and I think a lot of you are probably familiar with this stat, the buyer is 80% through the buying journey before they actually want to reach out and talk to your salesperson. You know, I know we're in the middle of football season, and so I want to use a football analogy here. So basically, your customer, your buyer, is on the 20-yard line getting ready to make a touchdown before they're ready to talk to your salesperson. So you've got to think about, well, what is that buyer doing from the 1-yard line on their side of the field all the way over to the 20-yard line on your side of the field? How are they getting to that 20-yard line? And inside of that answer really is the key to what makes digital marketing and demand generation work. Now, to help unpack that, I'm going to walk you through a typical buying journey. And I know there's a lot of businesses that are represented at different kinds of industries represented in today's webcast. And so these are kind of the 4, if you will, steps that every buyer goes through. So they're very common. And I'm going to use them to make a point here in a second. So we got to understand them first. So no matter what industry you're in, step 1 is always that the buyer is going to recognize they have a problem, right? So that's step 1. They're not going to fix something that's not broken, so they need to recognize they have a problem. Step 2, and often overlooked by marketing people and salespeople, is the next step isn't I have a problem, I'm going to fix the problem. The next step is I have a problem, I've got this squeaky wheel over here, but I've got all these other squeaky wheels out here. How am I going to decide which squeaky wheel I'm going to focus on right now? So step 2 is always, yeah, there's a problem. Is it enough of a problem for me to deal with now? And so that's kind of step 2 in their journey. And then once they've said, yes, the problem you can solve for them is one they're going to deal with, then they move into step 3, which is really understanding, how am I going to solve this problem? What am I going to do internally? What am I going to do externally? Who are the vendors that can help me? So that's kind of step 3. And then finally, step 4, this is when they're on that 20-yard line. That's when they start talking to your sales reps, right? So they've got to go through these 3 steps first before they're ready to engage with a salesperson. Now, I wish that reality was as linear and straight as what we're representing here on this slide, but that's not reality. Those 4 steps are absolutely steps that our buyers are going to go through, but in no way is it linear at all. In fact, it kind of looks like spaghetti on a plate, doesn't it? The reality is there's a lot of different things that are going to go on. There's a lot of different places they're going to go for information, and it becomes a big old mess. In fact, that's what we call it in our industry. We call that buying journey really the messy middle, because that's what it looks like. And we can't really control how that buyer is going to work their way through that messy middle. But what we can do is make sure we're focusing on the fundamentals, which are things we're going to be talking about today. And if we focus on those fundamentals and do them the right way, then as they navigate through their messy middle, we're going to encounter them and be useful and helpful to them every step of the way. But let me back up a second. So we're going to get back to kind of where we were. These are the 4 steps. And if we're going to be successful in generating demand and generating leads for our business in 2022, there's a key point that you need to understand. And that is that demand generation actually happens before step 1. If we're going to generate demand, we've got to connect with buyers when they're what I call a future buyer. So they're our ideal customer profile. We know they have that profile of our perfect customer, but they're not at step 1 yet. That's where demand generation actually happens. And if we do it the right way, then we are going to establish ourselves as the preferred vendor before they move into step 1. And then once they move into step 1, they're going to think of your business first because you've done that good work of demand generation. Now, lead generation happens down here around step 3. And so a lot of companies that are out there think that they're actually doing lead or demand generation when the reality is they're only doing lead generation. They're capturing demand that already exists in the marketplace, not generating their own demand. And that's a problem. The reason why that's a problem is, according to LinkedIn, only 5% of our customers are actually in market at any given time. So think about that for a second. That means that 95% of our customers are future buyers and 5% of our customers are now buyers. So if I have 1,000 targets that I'm going after, only 50 of those targets are actually in market right now. And if I try to just go after demand that already exists in the marketplace, I'm going to be fighting it out with all of my competition for 50 accounts that are in market right now. And so demand generation is, hey, let's work on the 95% and then also work on the 5%. And that's how those two things work well together. Let me try to give you an analogy to help get our heads around this for a second. And so imagine demand generation and lead generation working like this. So if you want to generate your own demand for your business, it's like going and creating or planting your own apple tree. Right? So you've got to go get the seed, you've got to plant it, you've got to water it, you've got to fertilize it. But the good news is you're going to grow a tree and you own that tree. That tree belongs to you. And so that tree really represents your ideal customer profile. And if you're doing the right things in the world of demand generation, then ultimately you're going to be able to put the ladder up, as you can see in this analogy, and start pulling fruit off of the tree. Now, here's the beautiful thing about that. If you've created your own demand, this apple tree lives inside of your backyard. You're the only one that can go pull the fruit off the tree. And so because you've done a good job in demand gen, once you pluck that lead off the tree, they're going to be ready to go. And more than likely, there's not going to be a lot of competition. So in the world of lead generation, where you're not doing demand generation and you don't have your own apple tree, and you need leads, right? You're going to have to go to the grocery store and compete for those apples with everybody else that wants those same apples. And so when we're doing demand gen and lead gen the right way, it's like creating your own leads that you own and control, and that's highly valuable for your business. If you do this well, what's going to happen is your buyers are going to remember the problem that you solve because you're talking to them before they're in market. They're going to value your point of view on how to solve that problem. In fact, if you've done a good job in demand generation, not only are they going to value your point of view, they're going to start aligning their beliefs on how to solve this problem with your strengths, which really kind of ties to number 3. They're going to believe ultimately that your brand, your company is the best solution for them, so that when they do go into market, they're really not talking to anybody else. All right, so let's take a look at our framework. All of that was to kind of set the stage of what is demand gen and why is it important. And so now we're going to get into the Vende digital framework for developing a demand gen funnel for your business. And there's really 3 steps to the process. There's activating the right audience, and I've got slides for each of these. I'm just going to give you a quick overview. Activating the right audience, establishing authority and empathy, and then nurturing relationships. So let's take a look at activating the right audience, and that's really kind of the first thing that we've got to do. And for each of these steps within our framework, I'm going to give you another kind of equation motif, if you will, like I did for demand generation. So what does activating your audience really look like? Well, it starts with understanding who our right audience is, and I can't emphasize enough how important this is. Many B2B companies struggle here because they think that, hey, if somebody can fog a mirror and write a check, then that's my customer. The reality is that is probably somebody that you can sell to, but if you're going to market and do demand gen the right way, you've got to find your best customers and focus your marketing really on your best customers. So that's what we mean by right audience. From there, we want to add organic and paid distribution, because our goal, remember, in demand gen is to get useful information out where our customers go to learn, and then we're going to use organic methods and paid methods to accomplish that. And then number 3, we want to make sure that whoever's got their ear, influencers, that we've got a way of connecting to them through influencers also. And then when we do those 3 things, we will have an activated audience. Now, I know this is a big problem because I see it all the time when I'm talking to B2B companies, but according to this data right here, over half of the B2B companies out there really struggle with understanding who their best buyer is and what channels do they go to where they can actually reach them and engage with them. And so we're going to spend some time really getting our heads around that today. And I can't emphasize this enough. I feel like I've already beaten on this horse a little bit, but I'm going to say it one more time, that you've got to identify your best possible customers if you're going to be successful, because that's going to give you kind of superpowers in the way that you market to them online. What we're looking for here, and I'm going to give you a framework for getting to this in just a second, but these are the things that we're looking for. When we're identifying our ideal customer profile, we want to find common pain, something that this subset of our customer base is really struggling with, and it's common. They all kind of have this problem. Number 2, we're looking for a similar buying journey, so that where they go and how they work through their process is a similar process. And then number 3, targetability. Can we reach them? Can we reach that buyer now that we know kind of who they are? Are we able to get them? Can we spend time, energy, and effort and actually get our message in front of them? So that's what we're looking for in building out our ideal customer profile. And so I'm going to walk you through how we do this for our clients, and hopefully this will be useful to you. So in coming up with an ideal customer profile, there's really 3 buckets that we need to go look at. The first bucket, and the most important bucket, is your happiest and most profitable customers. Now, sometimes those are the same customers, sometimes they're different, but it's important that you go back and analyze, hey, what customers love us the most? What customers make us the most money? And so it's not everybody, again, it's that subset of your customers that kind of fit that bucket, okay? And then from there, we also want to take a look at, and this is a huge miss, I see this all the time, go look at your closed won and closed lost deals, like the ones that are happening right now, and go analyze, why did they say yes? Why did they say no? That's going to give you some good indicators on who your ideal customer profile should be, or maybe not, on who they aren't, right? And then the last thing you want to do, the last bucket, if you will, is go to LinkedIn. Now, I love LinkedIn because what that's going to give you the ability to do is actually size out how big this market is. So you figured out by looking at existing customers and recent closed won, closed loss. Now let's go see how big that market is, and if it's big enough, great. If it's not big enough, then maybe we've got a targetability issue. So once we look into those buckets, these are the things that we're looking for right here. So we're looking for firmographic commonalities. We're looking for role and function. Remember, there's 5 to 11 folks that are involved in a B2B decision today. So we need to understand, what are all those titles? What are all those roles? So let's get those documented. The third bullet down may not be one that you think about very often, but is really important, and that's that psychographic scenario. So is there something that's common there? For example, at Vende Digital, we do have a psychographic thing that we're looking for in our prospects, and that is a marketing leader that really wants to be the quarterback and strategic, knows that digital marketing is important, but really doesn't want to stay up to date on all that stuff. They want a partner that they can trust that's really going to implement those things for them. That's the kind of leader that we're looking for, so that's kind of a psychographic fit for us. The next bullet down is source. So you want to go look at your Salesforce data or any kind of data that you've got that would show you, hey, where did this lead come from? What channel did it come from? What content were they engaging with? That's going to help you really dial in your ICP really, really well. The next bullet down is a competitive gap. You want to understand from this group of customers, or this ideal customer profile, is there something in there that they feel like your business delivers delivers that other competitors don't. Like they get, oh yeah, this company does the same thing that you do, but man, you do these 2 or 3 things differently, and that's why we do business with you. That's really gold if you can find that stuff. And then ultimately, the last bullet there kind of goes back to the LinkedIn bucket. We want to make sure that we've got at least 10,000 targets. So once you've figured out your ICP, go do a search in LinkedIn, and if there's 10,000 people that show up or more, you're in good shape. If there's less than 10,000, you might have a targetability issue. But that's really a great exercise for you to get your team together and really try to get your head around. This is more than a persona. This is really understanding your ideal customer profile. Once you've done that, though, I would highly encourage you to get friendly with real customers. You know, I talk to so many marketing leaders that believe that the relationship side of customers needs to happen with sales, right? The sales guy or sales gal, that's where the relationship with the customer really lives. And I agree, they're the primary place where that should happen. But man, if you want to be a better marketer, build relationships with real customers. Really have good, honest, real relationships with your customers, because once you do, you're really going to be able to understand what makes them tick, and that's going to help you on the marketing side. And this kind of goes back to understanding that competitive gap. But what you're wanting to find out from customers, and you can only do this by having a relationship with them, is, you know, what are the 2 to 3 things that your happiest customers know about you or your service or your business, that if the rest of the world out there, people that are not doing business with you today, that are in your ideal customer profile, that if they knew those 2 or 3 things, that they would absolutely consider you for whatever the problem is that you can solve for them. And again, you can do the best ICP homework out there, but until you talk to customers, you're really not going to know that. Okay, we're kind of heading down this path where we're talking about activating our audience, and now you kind of have an understanding of how to go about finding your ideal customer profile. The next thing we need to do down the formula is make sure that we are using a paid and organic way of activating them with useful information. And it's important that we understand there's 2 types of buyers, and we talked about this a little bit already, and we've got to have different approaches for those different types of buyers. So the future buyer, our goal with them is 100% about them consuming our content. So that if they're not in market right now and we're going to produce useful content, we want to make sure that 100% of our ideal customer profile is going to consume that information. And so we've got to engage in strategies that are going to make that happen. As we move down the funnel, though, and we've got folks that are in market, yes, we want them to consume our information, but now we have another goal as well, and that is to create momentum. Our goal is to, you know, if they're here at this step, whatever that next step is, we want to give them information that's going to make going to that next step super easy. So if they're on the 40-yard line on our side of the football field, what information can I share with them that's going to make them go from the 40 to the 30, right? So that's what we need to be thinking about, and we need to leverage both paid and organic to get there. So in the next leg of our framework, when we talk about really establishing authority, I'm going to go more into content. But for right now, as we think about what kind of information can we deliver in channels that they go to learn and deal with problems that they have, these are some types of things that you want to be sharing with them. Always talk about problems and solutions. At the end of the day, every B2B product that's out there is really an answer to a problem. I use this analogy a lot in these webcasts, but don't talk about aspirin until you've said, hey, do you have a headache, right? Because our product or service, the aspirin, is really an answer to a problem. And so we need to make sure that when we're out there communicating and really activating our audience, that we're talking about their problems and then we're talking about solutions to those problems. And here's 7 things that you should be thinking about building content around or activating your audience with. Your unique insights and point of view about how to deal with that problem. Problems that have high pain but are easy to prove that problem exists. Number 3, what are the symptoms or indicators? Imagine having a big dashboard. What are those yellow and red lights that are pointing out that maybe they're not aware of that you need to communicate to them? Number 4, you need to explain why they're struggling, because they may be living with a problem and they don't even know what's hitting them. Number 5, give them and educate them on the steps to relieve whatever the pain is that they're dealing with. And then number 6, we can't can't leave them hanging, right? We can talk about problems all day long. That's important. But ultimately, we've got to paint a picture of a better tomorrow. Hey, Mr. Customer, I know you've got this problem. If you'll follow these steps, here's what a better tomorrow looks like for you. And then number 7, we can't forget everything that we share when we're activating our audience ultimately needs to lead back to our superpower. So as we're talking about activating our audience, here's a really important tip. We need to deliver more information and more value actually in our posts. And so you can see in this example here, that's a pretty long post. One of the things that I like to say is start thinking about LinkedIn or whatever channel that you're going to engage in, whatever channel is the right channel for your buyer, as your new blog. Now, I'm not saying stop blogging. You absolutely need to blog, but instead of trying to get people out of your web or out of social onto your blog, to get to the good information, what you want to do is provide more of that information actually in the post. And one of the reasons you want to do that, and you can see it right here, is at LinkedIn. So this is a LinkedIn example. Less than 1% of the people on LinkedIn actually click on links inside of their feed. Think about that. Less than 1%. So if you're really trying to turn LinkedIn and your content as a bridge to get people out of LinkedIn, and 1,000 people see your post, only 50 are actually going to click on that link, right? So you're only talking to or delivering value to a very, very small number of folks. And you can see in this post here, I had over 5,000 people look at that post. And, again, less than 1% would have gotten the value out of that. I think I said 1,000. So 1% of 1,000 is actually 10. So I gave you some bad math there a minute ago. Hopefully you guys were probably chuckling about that. But anyways, 5,000 people saw this post, but only 50 might have actually, is that right? Or is it 5? It's only 5. Gosh, my math is terrible today. But I think you guys get the point, right? Put the content inside the channel where they are because they don't want to click. They actually just want to stay in channel, and you're going to get a lot more value out of your content that way. So kind of heading down that same path, it's really important that we start to leverage key people within our organization to help us organically get our content out there. And so you've got to have a strategy in 2022 that's going to help your sales reps, help your subject matter experts, and help your C-suite strategically share content on their profiles. And that's really, really important because today, this stat still blows my mind. There's 750 million people on LinkedIn today, but of those 750 million people, only 1% of those folks are actually sharing any content, doing posts on LinkedIn. Everybody else is just kind of scrolling through. And so if you can get your sales reps and your C-suite and your subject matter experts out there sharing your content, it's going to just grow exponentially who's able to see and get value from that content. Here's just a quick example. So when I share something on my personal profile versus Vende Digital, I can share the same piece of content. I'm going to get 5 times more reach on my profile than I would on the Vende Digital profile, and that's true with our clients as well. According to Hootsuite, when you engage in getting your other key people within your company to actually share your content, your engagement grows by 24 times. And that makes total sense, right? Because if you think about it, as a business, you have one profile page, one LinkedIn company page, for example, right? That's it. You post something there, you're done. But if you've got 24 employees that will also share strategic content to their connections on their profile page, you've just grown your reach exponentially. So really important to think about in 2022, how can I get more of my team actually sharing my content? But it can't just be content for the sake of content. It's got to be some of these things that we've talked about relating to activating our audience. All right, so now we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about paid and why do we want to engage in paid? Well, number one, and one of the things that I think is overlooked by a lot of B2B companies, it's guaranteed delivery of your content to your ideal customer profile. That's the number one reason you should be engaging in paid. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. It also is a way of making sure that folks have an awareness of your point of view and your unique selling proposition, that superpower. And then number three, if you're doing it the right way, you're also going to create momentum and move folks down the funnel. Now, taking a look at how should we spend our money, this is really what we recommend at Vende Digital. So, trying to reach those future buyers needs to be the biggest part of our investment from an advertising perspective. So we want to spend 60 to 70% of our advertising budget here. Now, this is a big miss. I see companies most of the time spending very little in top, middle of the funnel type activities, or sometimes none at all. They're spending all their advertising dollars on the bottom of the funnel. And that's so challenging because you're trying to take somebody that doesn't know that you exist today when you're advertising at the bottom, somebody that doesn't know you exist today, to get them to become a lead. But what's much better is to spend more dollars top of the funnel and really do all those things I just talked about, and then leverage things like retargeting and invest your bottom of the funnel tactics there to just help create some momentum and move people down the funnel. Now, LinkedIn has done some research on this, and when you invest in a full funnel advertising approach, according to LinkedIn, your conversion rates go through the roof, and that makes total sense to me. It goes back to the idea of only 5% of your customers are in market at a given time. So if you're advertising to all 100%, then when they start rolling in from future buyer to now buyer, you're going to capture that market before your competition, and so that's why you're going to get more conversion rates. Here's a great tip on how to just merge your organic and paid strategy together. So this is something that we recommend to our clients and that we do ourselves as well. And that is, use organic as a test bed. So, create some really good content, get your sales team, etc., out there sharing that content, and pay attention to what content's really starting to hit with your audience. And you can tell that by likes and engagement and things like that. And then use that information to go amplify that same content with paid. That's what we do all the time at Vende Digital, and it works really, really well. Now, a lot of people will sometimes tell me they think LinkedIn, and this is a LinkedIn example, by the way, it's our own data from what we spent for our business last quarter, that LinkedIn's really expensive and not effective, and I don't agree with that at all. You can see here over on the far right side that last quarter we generated over 500,000 impressions of our content. And I'm guessing some of you that are even watching this webcast today probably saw some of that. So that's really good. Remember, top of the funnel, I'm trying to get people to consume my content. But then take a look over on the left side. You'll notice that we were generating traffic to our website, which is our secondary goal, for less than $4 a click. Now, if you compare that to Google AdWords, some of our key phrases in our industry are like $30, $40 a click. So I'm getting highly qualified, highly targeted traffic to my website, for $3 to $4 a click. So it's a really good buy if you set it up the right way. Now, here's another resource I just want to highlight for you. I don't have time in today's session to go through this in great detail, but I did want to share this with you. It's a resource that if you go to that vendedigital.com/go page, you'll be able to just download this. But this is going to break down the different stages of the funnel and how to invest in those different stages, and then what are the tactics that you should be doing within those stages. So be sure to go check that out. Okay, we're going to take a look now at influencers and really who has the ear of your buyer. So I'm not talking about the Kardashians here. As B2B companies, we don't need to do that at all. But what we do need to do is go figure out who are the people that your buyers are listening to. There's two places I want to highlight real quick. The first one is LinkedIn. Did you know that LinkedIn is a search engine? Most people think of it as a social platform, and it's certainly that, but it's also a great search engine. And so one of the things that we do to find influencers on LinkedIn is we'll go into that search bar and we'll use a key phrase or a hashtag. I really like hashtags. And then you can refine your search by looking at posts, and then even refine it more by looking at a time period. And so I would encourage you guys, as you're trying to find people that have the ear of your buyer, go and do searches for some of your key phrases and find non-competitive folks that are out there that your buyer is listening to. Oftentimes, those folks, those influencers, will have a podcast, and that kind of leads me to the next really important way to activate our audience with influencers, and that is catch the podcast wave. Now, in 2022, I am not recommending that you go out and start a podcast. I think that's more of a varsity activity for a lot of businesses. But what I am recommending in 2022, get your subject matter experts on that podcast circuit. Get them out there sharing useful information to your target audience by being on these podcasts. I think that'll work really well for you. Okay, so we just got through talking about activating our audience, and now we need to move into establishing authority. And establishing authority really is all about just communicating to our buyer, yes, we are qualified to solve your problem, and we have empathy. We want to solve your problem. And so just like activate your audience and just like a demand gen, I actually have a little formula here that we're going to take a look at. So number one, if we're going to establish authority, we need to talk about problems and solutions. We need to add desired outcomes to that. Then we need to add insights and proof that this stuff actually works. And when we do those three things together, we're actually establishing authority for our business. Again, this is a big problem for a lot of B2B companies. Over 60% of B2B companies really struggle with understanding the buyer's needs and what their requirements are. And that's a really key part of what content marketing is all about, is understanding those buyers' needs and requirements and then communicating with words ways that they can deal with those needs. And that's really at the heart of content marketing, is establishing authority. Now, I don't have time to go into great lengths on how to do that today, but we just wrote a blog on this. It actually went live yesterday on how to build a content marketing strategy for demand generation. And so when I send you a follow-up email after today's webcast, I'm going to include a link to that blog, so you'll want to be sure to check it out. What I want to do, though, is try to create a little empathy here for what the buyer is looking for. So we've spent a lot of time in the webcast so far just talking about things you need to be doing, things you need to be thinking about in order to execute demand gen. But let's think about the buyer for a second. What do they want from you? And so this is kind of what I feel like they're looking for from us as marketers. Number one, they're saying, hey, help me see what's wrong. Help me understand why this bad thing is happening in my business, and then help me understand what I need to do about it. Give me information, give me tools, give me resources, give me guides, and make it easy for me to talk to a sales rep when I'm ready to talk to a sales rep. Don't force them on me, but make it easy. When I'm ready to talk to a salesperson, I can do that. And then finally, do it in a way that I like, and do it in a way in channels that I prefer. And so when you're thinking about your content marketing or how do you establish authority, really kind of attack it from the customer perspective, and you're going to do a lot better. Now, I'm going to give you a formula that we work with our clients to try to get your head around some of these things. And it always starts with understanding what your customer's desired outcome is. And so if you're going to create really good content and really good information that's going to establish authority for your business, it ultimately has to start with understanding what outcomes is my client trying to accomplish, or my customer, my buyer. And this example I'm going to walk you through, I'm just going to use Vende Digital as if we were the customer here. So we know that our customers, right, the desired outcome they're looking for is more sales and more revenue. So that's the outcome that we can help accomplish, right? So that's our outcome. You need to think about, and I would say get people around a room and say, hey, what does our ideal customer profile, what is their desired outcome? From there, you want to work backwards. Once you have that desired outcome, ask yourself the question, what are the drivers of that desired outcome? What things can they do in their business that are going to cause that outcome to happen? In our world, that's more opportunities and better sales follow-up, right? So if a client gets more opportunities, they're going to generate more revenue, more sales. And then from there, you need to look at influencers. So what are the things that influence those drivers? And at Vende Digital, we recommend going back 3 levels. And so you can see here, if my driver is more opportunities, then one of the influencers to that would be qualified leads. If I give more qualified leads to the sales team, we're going to have more opportunities, and that's going to turn into more revenue. An influencer to qualified leads might be more traffic or more ways to engage with our prospects. And then an influencer to those things, if you look at the far left over there, Better content's going to drive more traffic that's going to drive more qualified leads, and I think you get the point. I can tell you most B2B companies don't take the time to work through this process, and man, I'm telling you, get people together, get sales folks, get marketing folks together, and document this process, and I think you're going to be in really good shape. Once you kind of go through and understand those influencers and those drivers and those outcomes, then you need to ask yourself the question, what do they need? Like, now that we know what they're trying to accomplish, what things can we deliver to them that are going to help them accomplish that? And then what are some stories and examples that we can show to kind of prove and validate that if they do these things this way, they're going to get the desired outcomes that they're looking for? Here's another slide that's kind of a checklist of the type of content that you need to create to establish authority and empathy for your buyer. I don't have time to go through all these today, but kind of what we need we got a whole recipe here that we need to think about. One is, we need to be writing blogs. We need some gated or long form content. We need videos. We need infographics. You need to have an email strategy. I'm going to talk a little bit about email here in a moment. And then we need some case studies and just really testimonials and things like that are going to validate that we can solve this problem for them. So when you're thinking about developing content in 2022, work through that exercise and then think through this recipe of the types of content that you need to produce. Now, the last slide that I've got before we move on to the third leg of our framework is kind of this Q&A process that I would highly encourage every B2B company to go through before you hit the publish button. And the first thing is just look at the content and go, hey, is this about us or is this about the customer? So does it pass the me versus you test? Number two, ask yourself the question, is this content actually going to help them? Like, if they invest 5 minutes of their day to read this blog or whatever the case may be, are they going to be better off at the end of that than at the beginning of that? Number three, is this going to create momentum? Is it going to help them understand if they're at this stage, here's some things you can do to get to the next stage? And then number four, honestly, just look at your content and ask, is this good? I mean, is this something that people are going to go, wow, I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I spent 5 minutes of my day looking at this information. It is really good. And I promise you, if you'll go through those 4 questions, you'll create better content and you'll have happier customers. And as a result of that, you'll create demand for your business. Okay, we're starting to round the train here, around the corner, and we've got our last leg of our framework, which is nurturing relationships. And in the B2B world, we can't control when a buyer is going to go from future buyer to now buyer. We can't control that. But what we can control is when they do go from future to now buyer, that they think of your business first and not your competition. So here's our formula for that. Number one, we have to have a frictionless buyer journey. And so I don't think it's possible to have a 100% frictionless buyer journey, but we need to constantly be working on how do we make it easier for the buyer. Number two, we combine that with sales and marketing alignment. So are we working together as a team? Number three, marketing automation. So how do we leverage automation to stay top of mind with this buyer? And that's how we nurture relationships. And quite frankly, the company in 2022, the companies that actually make it easier for the buyer to say yes are the companies that are going to win. Because remember, everybody's going online these days. And if we're thinking about how do we turn our website and our web presence into a tool that's going to make it easy for them to say yes, we're going to beat our competition. So as you think about that, here's some goals. Number one, just kind of go through what are the logical next steps that our buyers need to get from point A to point B, or get from point A to the end of the alphabet, whatever you're talking about there. But we want to think through those logical steps and make sure that we've given them information that helps them at every step. Number two, we want to make sure we're delivering a world-class experience, something that isn't cumbersome, that isn't challenging. My wife right now is dealing with our bank just got bought out by another bank, and there's all kinds of problems dealing with that. And so they didn't take time to think about how do I surprise and delight our new customers. Instead, they're making it very painful and not frictionless for us. So how can we create surprise and delight every step of the way? And then number four, how do we stay top of mind, right? What are the things we need to be doing so that we're constantly, politely, kind of in their face, reminding them that these are the problems that we can solve for them? I have another resource for you here. Again, same page, vendedigital.com/go. But there's a UX checklist that we've developed. You can download that at that page or on that web's page, and you'll be able to go through our checklist. And it's going to help you really just think about your business and think about your web presence and make it as frictionless as possible. So let's talk a little bit about sales and marketing alignment, because I know this is a big challenge for B2Bs especially. And the important thing here is to understand that we work together on the same team, but we actually have different jobs. And so the marketing's job, just using a fishing analogy here, I don't know if you've ever been deep sea fishing, but really our job as marketers is to go out in the boat and kind of chum the waters, right? And by chumming the waters, that's how we're activating our audience and we're sharing useful, insightful information. That's going to be bringing the fish in. And then the salesperson's job is really to make sure they've got the right tackle, make sure they've got the right lures, make sure they're doing the work that is necessary to kind of reel that fish into the boat. And so really that's kind of our job. We need to work well together, and we don't want salespeople doing marketing jobs, and quite frankly, we don't want marketing people doing sales jobs. And so one thing that you might do in 2022 to kind of help get your teams aligned here is define some things. So number one, start with what are the roles and goals of the different departments. So what is the role of marketing? What is the role of sales? Number two, and man, I'm telling you, almost 100% of the time when I start working with a new client or I'm talking to a B2B company and I ask them for some of these definitions, like what is an MQL, what is an SQL, what is an SAL, what is your ideal customer profile, I get deer in headlights. Or worse than that, I actually get different answers as I go around the room. And so, man, it's really important that you actually define together, sales and marketing, what is a marketing qualified lead? What is a sales qualified lead? Let's agree on those things. And then number three is you need to be able to communicate as a marketing team to sales, what do you need from sales to win? Like, what is it that marketing needs to be successful in your function? And conversely, the sales team needs to do the same thing with you, and that's communicate back to you, hey, for us to be effective in hauling those fish out of the water into the boat, this is what we need marketing to do for us. And I think if you can agree on those things and even document those things, you're going to have much better sales and marketing alignment in 2022, and that's going to help you create demand and ultimately generate more pipeline. So as we're talking about sales people, one thing that you need to be communicating to your sales organization is that because of one of the things we talked about earlier, that the customer, the buyer, is putting off talking to that salesperson until the very last minute possible, that the salespeople still have a job to do when they're on the 1 yard line to the 20 yard line, and that is to really be this information concierge. So sales reps are awesome relationship people. Their job really needs to be going and connecting with your ICP, your buyer, wherever they are online, establishing a relationship with them, and then thinking about themselves as this information concierge. Hey, you're not ready to talk to me yet about deal points, but where are you in the cycle, and can I source some information that's going to help you and educate and inform you on how to deal with where you are in the cycle? And if you can communicate that to your sales reps and help them get their head around, it's not about generating a lead right now, but it's about taking this marketing qualified lead and thinking about yourself as an information concierge, then they're going to be in a much better position when that person does go from future buyer to now buyer. Now, when your sales reps are engaged in email and when they're engaged in social and they're engaged in normal outreach, historically, according to this stat by Ziff Davis, they're going to have a 30% higher win rate. So it's really important that your sales reps are engaging in all three channels: email, phone calls, face-to-face meetings, and in social media, and they're going to win there. Okay, so last couple of things I want to talk to you about before we wrap here. We're still kind of in this last plank of nurturing relationships, and you might be asking yourself, well, where does that leave email? Is email still important? And it absolutely is. I mean, let me ask yourself the question, I've seen people out there, like, for example, on Facebook or even LinkedIn, where folks have said, you know what, I'm going to take a break from Facebook for a while. I'm not going to do Facebook for a month or 6 months or whatever. I'll see you on the other side. And I think to a certain degree that might be good for individuals to do from time to time. But I can't imagine anybody taking a break from email. I mean, email is so intimate, it's so useful and critical to how we run our day-to-day lives, and that's true for our buyers too. So email is a critical part of our success in the future. But we need to stop thinking about email as direct response first. I think the key with email marketing today is really all about getting our content in front of our buyers. And then number two is really all about direct response. And so when I look at companies and how they're leveraging their marketing automation platforms or their email blasting, it's always about direct response. And yes, direct response has a role, but it has a role that's secondary to information dissemination. One of the things we do to help with that is we create these around the world campaigns, and I've got an example of one here. This is one that we actually leverage at Vende Digital, where we actually build out, you'll probably laugh, I'm laughing, 50 emails in a drip sequence where folks that are opted in, and of course it is segmented, so that there's different ways people can get into it and different emails based on the segment, but we want to walk them through a flow that's going to happen over the course of a year, basically. That if you look on the slide here, we're going to give them a tip in week 1. We're going to give them a resource in week 2. We're going to give them a blog that we think will be useful to them in week 3. And then in week 4, we're going to have more of a salesy call to action. Hey, are you ready to talk to a salesperson type message? And then we just repeat that over the course of a year. And we find that that's a really great way of leveraging email as an information dissemination tool first. Now, this is another resource that I've made available to you. So at that webpage, vendedigital.com/go, you can download. It's actually a Google Doc, so you'll go over, you'll have to make a copy for yourself, but then you'll be able to use that for your team if you want to give that a try. Okay, well, here's the thing. I'm always being accused of fire hosing people during these webcasts, and as I'm looking at the time here and seeing we're right at an hour, I told you we'd go 45 or 50 minutes, and I lied to you. We're already at 60 minutes. I am going to wrap right now, I promise. Thank you for hanging with me, but we said at the very beginning of the webcast that I wanted to give you a framework that was going to help you build a demand gen funnel for your business, and this is our definition of demand. I just brought it back up again. Hopefully you've learned some things on how to create the right audience for your business, what you can do to share with them really useful, insightful content, and what you need to do to keep that content always on. But remember, you've got to point it to your superpower, and if you've done a good job of picking that ideal customer profile, that's going to be a lot easier to do. And if you do those things, you're going to create demand for your business and then ultimately get these good outcomes that we talked about at the very beginning. And I really do want everybody that's attending today's webcast to have a happy sales force, but more importantly, to have a happy boss. So hopefully these things are going to be helpful and useful to you. I am going to stay towards the end. Like I said, when we wrap here in just a couple of minutes, I'm going to jump on chat. If there's any questions out there that are still need to be answered, if you want to just hang for a little bit, I'll stay on chat and answer any questions for you. But in the last couple of minutes here, I just want to remind you that on November the 10th, we're going to kick off this Demand Gen Jam session. I'm really excited about it. Basically, we're going to meet for an hour. We're going to do this once in November, once in December. If it kind of picks up and takes off like I hope that it will, we may do them more frequently starting in January. But the idea is I'm just going to bring a couple of agenda items to the table. There won't be any slides or anything like that. It'll be a Zoom call. And I'll talk about a couple of things that are on the agenda, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. And we'll stay as long as there's questions. So my guess is that'll probably be like 30 or 40 minutes. We're going to schedule them for an hour, so if they go an hour, they go an hour. But my guess is we'll just hop in, talk about a few things, get questions answered, and then hop out. And so I really want to build a community of like-minded B2B marketers that are trying to do demand generation the right way. And so this is like free consulting. There's no sales pitch at all. It's just going to be us talking about how to do demand gen the right way. Our first session, I've already got the agenda figured out. Because we are kind of at the end of the year, I want to focus on really planning for 2022. So taking some of the concepts we went through today and just fleshing out some more of the details. And then I also want to talk about budgeting. So how do you figure out how much money you need to ask for? And then of that, how do you allocate it between ads or top of the funnel, middle of the funnel? So we'll talk about that when we have our first session. So hopefully you can make it. Of course, I'll be sending out some emails just to remind you about that. You can go to our website, that webpage I've pointed to a couple of times already, vendedigital.com/go. And there's a place for you to sign up for that Zoom call. I really do hope that you can make it out there. And hey, everybody, thank you so much for hanging with me. Really excited to share with you our framework for developing a demand gen funnel for your business. I do hope this was valuable to you. And like I said, hang with me for a little bit on chat if you want. If not, have a great rest of your day.